The evening light was fading when Daniel saw her again. The sky above the coastal town was painted in bruised shades of violet and blue, the air thick with the scent of rain. He had come to the pier like he always did, out of habit, not hope. But there she was, standing at the edge of the dock, hair tangled by the wind, staring out at the restless S. And it had been 7 years. 7 long, uneven years since Emily left without a word. Daniel froze mid-step. For a heartbeat, he thought he was dreaming. The waves whispered softly beneath the boards, and his pulse roared louder than the ocean. She looked exactly the same and nothing like the girl he remembered. Older, steadier, her face touched by time and distance. That he wanted to speak, to call her name, but the words tangled in his throat. Instead, he stood there, hidden behind the rusted lamppost, watching her like a ghost, unsure if it belonged in this world. The last time they spoke, it was raining. They were young and stupid and full of reasons to hurt each other. Emily had dreams of leaving this town, of something bigger, brighter, somewhere she could breathe. Daniel, stuck between his father's failing fishing business and a dying town, had no dreams left to give her. He told her to go. He thought it was the noble thing. But he never forgave himself for how easily she did. Now, years later, she was here, and he didn't know why. He finally stepped forward. The boards creaked beneath his boots, and she turned. Her eyes widened slightly, not shock, not joy, not fear, just that quiet recognition that felt like a knife. "Daniel," she said softly. "Emily." For a moment, that was all. Their names hung between them like a secret too heavy to speak. The wind carried the smell of salt and rust and rain. The tide was coming in. "You came back," he said, his voice rougher than he remembered. "I did." She looked down at her hands, then back at the horizon. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here. I wasn't sure you'd remember where here was." That made her smile, barely. A sad, trembling smile that didn't reach her eyes. She turned back toward the sea. "I needed to see it again. The pier, the water, everything looks smaller. Maybe you got bigger." "I don't think so," she whispered. "I just got older." They stood there in silence. Seagulls wheeled above the dark water, their cries lost in the distance. The world around them seemed both infinite and impossibly small. Daniel wanted to ask her everything. Where she'd been, what she'd done, why she left. But the questions felt useless now. They belonged to another life. "Are you staying long?" he finally asked. "I don't know yet," she said. "I came back from my mother's house. After she passed, I thought someone should." She trailed off, unable to finish. It felt wrong, leaving it empty. He nodded slowly. "I heard. I'm sorry. Thanks." The conversation drifted, uncertain, like a paper boat in a storm. He wanted to reach for her, to break the invisible distance that 7 years had carved between them. But something, pride, fear, regret, kept him still. "Do you still work at the docks?" she asked suddenly. He nodded. "Yeah. Someone's got to keep the boats running. Not much else left here." Her gaze softened. "You never left, did you?" "I thought about it," he said. "But every time I packed, something made me stay." "Something?" she asked quietly. He met her eyes. "Someone." The silence that followed was heavier than the sea. Emily looked away, blinking hard. The tide lapped closer, washing over the pier's lower boards. "I should go," she said at last. "It's getting dark." "Yeah." She turned to leave, and Daniel felt panic rise in his chest. That same desperate ache from 7 years ago, the one that whispered, "Don't let her go this time." He wanted to stop her, to say something that mattered, but the words came out small. "Emily," she paused. "Maybe we could talk," he said. "Properly, I mean. Not like this. Just catch up." Her expression flickered, caught between hesitation and longing. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because I don't know if I'm ready to remember." He wanted to argue, but she was already walking away, her footsteps echoing against the boards. When she reached the end of the pier, she turned once more. For a brief second, the sunset caught her face. That same face he'd memorized years ago. The one he thought he'd never see again. Then she was gone. Daniel stood there long after she disappeared, listening to the sound of the sea and the whisper of old ghosts. The world had moved on, but his heart hadn't. He wondered if it ever would. That night, he couldn't sleep. The rain came again, soft, steady, relentless, and every drop against the window sounded like her name. That he thought of all the things left unsaid. The promises never kept. The love that never died just hid beneath the weight of time. When dawn broke, he knew he couldn't just let her vanish again. The next morning, Daniel found himself outside her mother's house, the old two-story on Maple Street, with peeling white paint and a garden overrun with wildflowers. The curtains were drawn. He hesitated, hand raised to knock. Before he could, the door opened. Emily stood there, barefoot, wearing one of those faded sweaters she used to steal from him years ago. The sight hit him like a wave. "You're up early," she said, surprised but not unkind. "Couldn't sleep," he replied. "Thought I'd see if you needed help." "With the house." She studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." The inside smelled like dust and old wood. Photos lined the hallway. Emily as a child, her parents smiling, the kind of happiness that fades quietly with time. Daniel followed her into the kitchen, where two mugs sat on the counter. "I was just making coffee," she said. "Still drink it black?" He smiled faintly. "You remembered." "I remember a lot of things," she murmured, sliding a mug toward him. They sat across from each other, the years shrinking to inches between them. Outside, the rain began again, soft and rhythmic. It felt almost like a sign. "Why did you come back, really?" he asked finally. She stared into her cup. "Because I wanted to see if it still hurt." "And does it?" She looked up, eyes wet with a sadness that wasn't entirely regret. "Yes," she said. "But maybe that means it mattered." Daniel didn't reply. There was nothing to say that could undo the years or the choices that had carved their distance. But something small and fragile flickered between them. The faint shape of something that once was, maybe still could be. Outside, the waves crashed against the shore, washing the world clean again. The next few days slipped by in a rhythm that neither Daniel nor Emily could quite name. She stayed at her mother's house, sorting through old boxes and dust-covered memories. He kept finding reasons to stop by, fixing a broken fence, bringing her groceries, pretending the town hadn't already noticed her return. In a place as small as theirs, news traveled faster than the wind. People whispered when they saw them together again. The girl who left. The boy who never did. It was like a story the town had been waiting years to finish. Daniel didn't mind the whispers. What unsettled him more was how natural it felt to fall back into her orbit. The way her laughter could still undo him. The way silence between them still carried meaning. There were moments when it felt like no time had passed at all, and others when the weight of those 7 years pressed so heavily that it hurt to breathe. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch surrounded by fading sunlight, Emily asked, "Do you ever think about leaving?" Daniel leaned back in the chair, watching the horizon fade into gold. "Every day, but it's hard to leave something that built you. Or broke you," she said softly. He turned to her. "Which one was it for you?" She smiled faintly. "Both." The wind moved through the garden, carrying the scent of sea salt and old lilacs. The air was heavy with the unspoken, the memory of the night she left, the argument that had ended everything. Daniel remembered it too clearly. The rain, the shouting, the way she stood in the doorway with her suitcase, trembling but resolute. "You said you couldn't live here anymore," he said quietly. "That this place felt like a cage." "It did," she admitted. "But leaving didn't make me free. It just made me lost." He watched her fingers trace the rim of her mug, slow and thoughtful. "Where did you go?" he asked. "Everywhere. Cities, jobs, people. I kept moving, like if I stopped, the noise would catch up. I thought if I built a new life, I'd forget this one. But I never did." She looked at him then, eyes full of ghosts. "You were in everything, Daniel. Every mistake. Every almost. Every empty room." He didn't know what to say. For years, he had imagined her gone. Happy, far away, living the life he couldn't give her. Hearing the truth now felt both comforting and cruel. "I never hated you for leaving," he said. "I know," she whispered. "That's what made it worse." They fell into silence again. The sky darkened, and a few drops of rain began to fall, gentle at first, then steadier, until they had to move inside. Emily left the porch light on, casting a warm glow through the rain-streaked window. Inside, the house felt smaller. Closer. She sat on the couch, pulling her knees up, while Daniel stood near the window, staring at the rain. "You still do that," she said. "Do what?" "Watch storms like they're trying to tell you something." He smiled faintly. "Maybe they are. What do you think they're saying tonight?" He turned toward her. "That sometimes Things break because they have to. She looked down, her voice barely audible. And sometimes, they break because we let them. He crossed the room slowly and sat beside her. The air between them was electric. Not the spark of something new, but the pulse of something old refusing to die. When his hand brushed hers, she didn't pull away. I never stopped wondering, he said. What would have happened if I asked you to stay? And I never stopped wondering, she whispered. What would have happened if I didn't? The rain grew heavier, filling the silence with rhythm. She leaned her head back against the couch, closing her eyes. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then, quietly, she said, Do you ever think we could start over? Daniel hesitated. The question hit like a wave, not sudden, but deep. I don't know if we can start over, he said. But maybe we can keep going. She opened her eyes. What's the difference? He smiled sadly. Starting over means pretending none of it happened. Keeping going means learning to live with it. Emily nodded slowly. I think I could do that. That night, Daniel stayed longer than he meant to. They talked until the rain stopped, until the storm turned to mist. When he finally left, the first pale light of dawn had begun to touch the sea. For the first time in years, he felt something like peace. Fragile, fleeting, but real. The days turned into weeks. They began to fall into a quiet rhythm again. Morning coffee on the porch, walks by the shore, small talk that stretched into laughter. There were still things they didn't say, but the silence between them felt gentler now, less like a wound and more like a scar healing in the open air. Sometimes Daniel caught himself studying her when she wasn't looking, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the faint freckles that the city sun hadn't erased. She had changed, yes, but the essence of her, the part that used to pull him toward her like gravity, was the same point. One afternoon, as they walked along the pier, Emily stopped suddenly. Do you remember the night before I left? He froze. Yeah, I try not to. I don't blame you, she said. But I think about it all the time. How angry I was. How scared. I said things I didn't mean. So did I, he said quietly. She nodded, staring out at the waves. I thought I was saving myself. But really, I was just running away from everything that made me who I was. Including you. Daniel took a deep breath. Then maybe this is your way back. She looked at him, eyes glistening. And you? What about you? I think I've been waiting, he said. For you to come back. For me to stop waiting. A seagull cried overhead, and for a moment, the world felt suspended, as if everything that had ever been broken could be made whole again in the space between one breath and the next. Emily stepped closer, so close he could feel her heartbeat through the air. I don't want to hurt you again, Daniel. Then don't, he said simply. Her lips parted, to speak, to apologize, to promise something neither of them could name. But before she could, a voice called out from the other end of the pier. Emily. They both turned. A man was walking toward them, tall, wearing a dark coat, his footsteps sure and unhurried. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Emily's expression shifted, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. This is Mark, she said quickly. He's someone I knew from the city. Daniel nodded stiffly, though the word someone carried a sting. Mark extended a hand. You must be Daniel. I've heard about you. Have you? Daniel replied, not taking it. Mark smiled thinly. Emily talks about this place like it's some kind of ghost story. Then you're standing in the middle of it, Daniel said. The tension was thick enough to taste. Emily stepped between them. Mark's just visiting. He wanted to see where I grew up. Daniel forced a nod. Right. They spoke for a few minutes. Polite, hollow words that filled the space where something raw and painful lived. Then Mark suggested heading back to town. Emily hesitated, glancing at Daniel. I'll see you later, she said softly. He nodded again, but when she turned away, something inside him fractured, quietly, invisibly. That night, Daniel sat alone by the docks, the air sharp with salt and moonlight. He told himself it didn't matter, that whatever they had was too fragile to survive the real world. But the ache in his chest told a different story. He thought of her laughter, her eyes, the way she'd said maybe we can keep going. And he wondered if she meant it, or if that, too, was something she'd leave behind. When the tide came in, he stayed. Watching, waiting, listening to the sea whisper what it always had. That love, like water, always finds its way back. For 3 days, Daniel didn't see Emily. The town felt emptier for it, like the color had drained from everything. The coffee at the diner tasted duller, The waves sounded lonelier. He told himself it was better this way, that she had a life somewhere else, and he was foolish to think she'd stay. But hearts are stubborn things. They keep asking questions even when the mind has stopped answering. On the fourth evening, he went for a walk by the cliffs. The sun was low, the sea restless. From there, he could see her mother's house, lights glowing faintly through the mist. Then he saw her. She was standing at the edge of the hill, hair pulled back, wearing his old flannel jacket. The sight hit him like déjà vu. For a moment, it was as if the years had folded in on themselves, bringing everything full circle. He almost turned back, almost. But she turned first. "Daniel," she called, voice trembling in the wind as he walked toward her, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. "Didn't think I'd see you again." "I wasn't sure if I'd come back," she admitted. He stopped a few feet away. "And the man from the pier?" "He left," she said quietly. "It wasn't what I thought it was. He reminded me of something I was trying to fix, a version of me that didn't exist anymore." Daniel said nothing, waiting. Emily took a deep breath. "I should have told you sooner. I didn't bring him here to hurt you. I brought him here because I needed to see who I'd become. I thought I could fit both worlds into one, the person I was and the person I became. But standing here, I realized I can't." "And which one are you now?" he asked softly. She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "Maybe I'm still trying to figure that out." The waves crashed below, sending up a spray of salt and sound. The world felt suspended, the way it always did when something important was about to break. "I kept thinking," she said, "that love had to be loud to be real, that it had to fight and burn and tear things apart. But you," she shook her head, "you loved quietly. I didn't understand that then." Daniel looked down. "And now I think quiet love is the only kind that lasts." He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. But part of him was still afraid of reopening a wound that had never quite healed. "Emily," he said finally, "I don't know if we can go back." "I don't want to go back," she said. "I just don't want to walk away this time." For a long moment, neither spoke. The sea roared beneath them. The wind pushed against their clothes, urging them closer. Then Daniel reached out and took her hand, slow, careful, like touching something sacred. "Then don't," he said. They walked back to town together, saying little. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything they'd left unsaid. When they reached the old cafe, Emily stopped. "Do you remember this place?" she asked. "How could I forget?" He said, smiling faintly. "You spilled coffee all over me the first day we met. And you still came back. I think I wanted to see if you'd do it again." She laughed, that same soft, nervous laugh that used to undo him completely. Inside, the cafe looked smaller than he remembered. The same cracked tiles, the same flickering light over the counter. They sat at their old booth, and for the first time in years, it felt like home. For a while, they just talked, not about the past or the pain, but about small things, the sea, the bakery down the road, the fact that Mrs. Lawson's cat was still terrorizing the neighborhood. It felt easy, real. When they stepped outside again, the rain had started, light at first, then heavier. Emily tilted her face toward it, eyes closed, smiling. "You always loved the rain," Daniel said. "I think it's because it makes everything start over," she replied. "Even just for a moment." He watched her, the rain in her hair, the light on her skin, and thought that maybe she was right. Maybe life did give you second chances, just not the way you expected. Weeks passed. The town adjusted to seeing them together again. Some people smiled knowingly, others whispered, but it didn't matter. They went on with quiet routines, morning walks, fixing her mother's garden, late-night talks in Daniel's workshop. That IT wasn't perfect. There were arguments, small misunderstandings, days when Emily grew restless again. But this time she stayed. And Daniel learned to let her breathe, to love her without trying to keep her still. One night, as autumn began to settle over the town, they sat by the dock watching lanterns drift across the water. The festival of lights, something they hadn't shared since they were teenagers. "Do you remember what we used to wish for?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "You wanted to see the world. I wanted you to stay." She smiled. "I did see the world. And somehow, I still ended up here." "Maybe that was the wish working both ways," he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, eyes following the lanterns as they floated farther out to sea. "Do you think we'll be okay?" she asked quietly. Daniel thought for a moment. "I think we already are." The words hung between them, soft and certain. The lanterns glowed brighter for a moment, as if agreeing. Winter came gently that year. The sea froze in parts. The streets grew quieter. Emily found a small job at the library, sorting books and helping tourists find old maps. Daniel kept working at the boatyard, his hands rough, his face always a little sunburned from the cold. They settled into a rhythm, one that didn't demand too much, one that left space for breathing. It wasn't the kind of love that demanded fireworks. It was the kind that glowed quietly in the dark. Sometimes, at night, Emily would wake and find him by the window, looking out at the waves. Still waiting for something? She'd whispered if he'd smile, just making sure it's still there. One morning, after a long night of snow, Emily found an old envelope on the porch, yellowed, weathered, sealed with faded ink. No address, just her name. Inside was a photograph, two teenagers laughing in the rain, soaked and breathless. On the back, written in Daniel's old handwriting, were the words, "For when you forget what home feels like." She turned it over again and again, her fingers trembling. The memory of that day came back in pieces. The downpour, the joy, the simplicity of being young and believing the world was small enough to fit into one afternoon. When she showed Daniel, he laughed softly. "Didn't think you'd find that. You kept it all this time?" He shrugged. "Some things are worth keeping, even if they hurt." She looked at him, eyes shining. "Thank you for waiting." "I wasn't waiting," he said. "I was living. You just happened to be the part one didn't get over." Years passed like the tide, quietly, faithfully. Somewhere along the way, they grew older together without meaning to. The town changed. New houses, new faces, but the rhythm stayed. They grew softer, calmer. The kind of people who didn't chase storms anymore, but stood and watched them pass. One spring morning, Daniel woke early and found Emily sitting on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was pink with dawn, the sea calm and endless. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Didn't want to miss this," she said, nodding toward the horizon. "Every morning feels borrowed now. I don't want to waste it." He sat beside her, their hands finding each other without thought. For a long time, they said nothing. The world was quiet except for the waves. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Leaving, coming back." "All of it." He thought for a long moment. Then he said, "No, because it brought me here. To this." She smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "Me too." They sat there until the sun climbed high, until the world turned gold again. And as the morning light washed over them, Daniel realized something simple, something he'd always known but never said aloud. Love doesn't end when people leave. It ends when they stop coming back. And she came back. That was enough. That evening, as the last light faded from the horizon, Emily whispered, "Do you think the sea remembers us?" Daniel smiled, pulling her closer. "No, but I think we remember it enough for both of us." And for the first time in years, the world felt whole again, not because everything had been fixed, but because it didn't need to be. The sea sighed softly in the dark, carrying their story into the endless blue, a quiet reminder that some hearts don't move on. They come home,